The man-catcher. The man-catcher looked like farm gear more than a weapon. It was a long pole with a spiked collar. Soldiers in late medieval Europe used it to pull knights off horses. The collar grabbed the neck, arm, or shoulder, and once it caught, the rider was yanked down. The goal was to take prisoners alive. A knight in armor could be ransomed for huge sums, sometimes enough to change a soldier's life, but the weapon was rarely gentle. With too much force, it could break bones or crush throats. Knights caught this way often ended up hurt, even if captured. It never became common because it was clumsy and risky. Still, it shows how money shaped warfare. Capturing was often worth more than killing. The lantern shield. During the Renaissance in Italy, inventors blended art, technology, and combat. One of the strangest results was the lantern shield. At first glance, it was just a small buckler, but it came loaded with extras: spikes, hooks, hidden blades, and most famously, a lantern. The tactic was to fight in darkness, then suddenly shine light in an opponent's face. While they flinched, the wielder struck with spikes or released hidden blades. It was as much trick as weapon. The idea sounded clever, but it was heavy and awkward. It never caught on, but it reflects Renaissance creativity, when weapons sometimes looked more like gadgets than tools of war. The Kupinga. In Central Africa, Azande warriors carried the Kupinga, a throwing blade that looked chaotic but was deadly. It had 3 or more sharp edges jutting at different angles. When thrown, it spun unpredictably, cutting in several directions at once. Shields offered little protection, since deflecting one edge still left another to slice flesh. The Kupinga was more than a weapon. It was a mark of status. Only married men carried it, a sign of maturity and readiness to protect a family. It was even part of dowries. On the battlefield, the Kupinga terrified enemies. Once these blades started flying, there was no easy defense. The sight of several in the air could weaken morale before a strike landed. The Urumi. From India came the Urumi, a weapon that blurred sword and whip. Instead of a solid blade, it used a strip of flexible steel. Fighters spun it constantly, creating a circle of danger, striking multiple opponents at once. The Urumi curled around shields or armor, cutting into exposed flesh, but it was just as dangerous to the user. One mistake and the blade snapped back. Training was tough, with students starting on leather whips before steel. Masters sometimes wielded 2 or more, turning into storms of steel ribbons. The Urumi wasn't just combat, it was tied to Kalaripayattu, one of the oldest martial arts. Even today in Kerala, it is shown with respect, treated as both weapon and tradition. The Jua. Ancient China produced the Jua, a weapon as intimidating as it was destructive. It was a heavy pole topped with an iron claw shaped like a dragon's foot. Each finger ended in hooks. Soldiers used it to drag riders, tear shields apart, or rake into armor. It was built less for finesse and more for pure brutality. The dragon-like look added symbolic power, as the dragon was a figure of strength and fear in Chinese culture. The Jua was too heavy and impractical to spread, but as a weapon of intimidation, it was unmatched. The matchlock axe gun. When firearms first appeared, they were unreliable and slow. This led to hybrids like the matchlock axe gun, half musket, half axe. If the gun worked, the soldier fired. If not, he had a sharp weapon to swing. Some designs even added spear tips, turning it into a 3-in-1 tool. In practice, it wasn't good at any role. The gun was fragile, the axe unbalanced, and the combination awkward. But it reflected a turning point in warfare, when soldiers didn't fully trust firearms and still clung to blades for reassurance. The haladi. From India and Syria came the haladi, a dagger with blades at both ends of the handle. Some versions added a third blade, forming a trident-like weapon. It was popular with Rajput warriors in India, who carried it as a symbol of honor and bravery. In skilled hands, the haladi struck in multiple directions with a single swing. Without training, though, it was as dangerous to the wielder as the opponent. It looked like something from a fantasy story, mixing elegance with danger. The monk's spade. One of China's most unusual yet practical weapons was the monk's spade. On one end was a shovel-like blade, on the other, a crescent. Tradition says Buddhist monks carried it on long journeys. The shovel buried the dead they found on the road, while the crescent scared away animals or bandits. Over time, it became part of Shaolin martial arts. In combat, the spade pushed, tripped, or struck, while the crescent hooked riders or slashed groups. More than its uses, it symbolized balance, mercy on one side, survival on the other.